man, this movie, it's just too much.
Yeah, the writers are on the set. These are twisted minds to come up with stuff like what we just saw. Do you fear
what's
that?
their deal?
Yeah.
There's more killing in this movie than I think any movie I've ever seen.
For a movie to be banned, it has to be really shocking in some way. But banning a movie just makes us more curious. What could be so extreme that it has to be hidden from human eyes? Today, we'll rank movies banned for being too disturbing, starting from the least to the most disturbing. I'm Visualventure, and you are awesome. The Last Temptation of Christ. The Last Temptation of Christ caused chaos when it came out. First, theaters refused to show it. Then, video stores wouldn't rent it out. Finally, when a few brave movie theaters decided to screen the movie, they were attacked by angry mobs. The backlash was intense, but people weren't surprised, because this movie was doomed as soon as the project started. And the first red flag was the man directing the movie, Martin Scorsese. In the 1980s, Martin Scorsese was already a Hollywood legend. He directed hit movies that made a lot of money at the box office. Despite all the success, Scorsese felt like something was missing in his career.
Well, over the years, I was always interested in making a film on Jesus. Either from the character of Jesus, either seen through the Gospels or through other eyes, in a sense.
But Scorsese didn't have a resume for a religious film. His previous movies were mostly about violence and crime. One of his movies, Taxi Driver, was so disturbing that it inspired someone to become an assassin. Scorsese was the last person anyone expected to direct a religious film, but against all odds, he did it. In 1988, he released The Last Temptation of Christ. But when the film premiered, audiences were shocked by what they saw on screen. The movie opens with a disclaimer. This film is not based on the Gospels, but upon the fictional exploration of the eternal spiritual conflict. But that warning wasn't nearly enough to prepare people for what they were about to see. At first, the movie follows the normal Bible story. Jesus is baptized, starts preaching, gathers disciples, and performs miracles.
They'll have the real value, the value of love, to love, share, and comfort. They'll have the courage to do the good.
Jesus knows that it's his destiny to die on the cross. Then the story takes a bizarre twist. Someone suggests to Jesus that he doesn't have to sacrifice himself on the cross. Instead, he could have a normal life, marry, have kids, and live happily ever after.
I admit it. I'd like it, but I'll never have it.
Listen, if you really want God, don't spend your time in the desert. He's not there. He's right here. Read your scriptures. God doesn't want you to fast and pray. He wants you to make children.
At first, Jesus resists the idea, but as time goes on, the temptation becomes harder to ignore.
When I see a woman, I blush and look away. I want her, but I don't take her for God.
Eventually, the devil tricks Jesus into abandoning his divine mission. In this alternate version of the story, Jesus steps down from the cross and starts a new life. He marries Mary Magdalene, and they're happy together. There's even a scene of them consummating their marriage. Years later, as an old man, Jesus regrets giving up the cross. He kneels down and prays, begging God for a second chance to become the Messiah.
I didn't fight hard enough. Give me your hand. I want to pay the price.
In a dramatic twist, the movie ends with Jesus back on the cross, completing his sacrifice for humanity. Scorsese and his team spent $7 million on the film, going all out to make it a success. But when it finally premiered in August 1988, viewers couldn't stand it. Christian groups called the film disrespectful and blasphemous. What really set them off was the scene of Jesus getting intimate with his wife. But the backlash didn't stop the studio from promoting the film. So some angry people took matters into their own hands. 2 months after the film was released, a Christian group set a movie theater on fire for showing the film. Around that same time, the director Martin Scorsese started getting death threats. It got so bad that he hired bodyguards to keep him safe for years. Religious groups staged protests that went on for weeks. Their efforts paid off. Many theater chains refused to screen the movie. Additionally, many religious countries, including Greece, Argentina, and Mexico, banned the film. 30 years have passed since the movie came out, but to this day, The Last Temptation of Christ remains one of the most controversial banned movies ever made. This next film had a lot of famous actors, but the ideas in the movie were dangerous for society. Natural born killers. Natural Born Killers wasn't banned because people hated it. It was banned because they liked it too much. Some people even wanted to act like the characters in the movie. But if you know anything about the film, you'll understand why anyone imitating it was a recipe for disaster. Natural Born Killers is a romantic crime action film from 1994. The movie follows the story of Mickey Knox and his girlfriend Mallory. Both of them come from deeply troubled families. But when they meet, it's love at first sight.
Who are you?
Who are you?
I'm Mallory.
It seems like a typical love story. Mickey and Mallory even make plans to run away together. That's when the movie goes from romantic to disturbing. Mallory doesn't like her parents because of how they treat her. Before she and Mickey hit the road, they end Mallory's parents' lives as an act of revenge. After the crime, the couple has an unofficial marriage ceremony on a bridge.
You marry me?
Of course I'll marry you. I've been waiting for you to say that for so long.
As husband and wife, they journey across the country, but it's going to be a horrifying journey. As Mickey and Mallory move from place to place, they leave a trail of bodies behind. In one scene, they eliminate everyone in a diner just for fun. Soon, they realize they've claimed 52 victims in New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. The police launch a manhunt to catch them. Mickey and Mallory's faces are everywhere on TV and in newspapers. The police expect the public to help them track down the fugitives, but the opposite happens. Instead of seeing Mickey and Mallory as villains, the media turns them into idols. TV reporters romanticize their crimes. One journalist named Wayne Gale takes it even further. On a show, Wayne portrays the couple as rebels fighting against a broken system.
To tell the tale of Mickey and Mallory.
Thanks to the media, Mickey and Mallory become full-blown celebrities. However, they don't get to enjoy their newfound fame. After a violent shootout with the police, the couple is arrested and sent to prison. But even behind bars, their fame doesn't fade. Reporters are desperate to interview them. After spending a year in jail, Mickey and Mallory somehow manage to break out. After all their crimes, the film ends with Mickey and Mallory walking away without any consequences.
Come on, miss. Come on, let's go.
Okay, baby.
Natural Born Killers premiered in August 1994, and it was an instant hit. During its open weekend, it went straight to #1 at the US box office. It made $110 million on a $34 million budget, which was a huge profit. However, the film's popularity soon became a curse. Copycat crimes in real life started happening across the country. The criminals behind these attacks said the film inspired them. One even dressed like Mickey Knox during his crime. Another group of real criminals codenamed their attack NBK, which stands for Natural Born Killers. People started accusing the movie of sending the wrong message, that breaking the law was somehow cool. The ending, where fugitives walk away free, was the worst part. But according to the director, that was the exact opposite of what he was trying to portray. The film was meant to criticize how the mass media sensationalizes crimes just to boost ratings and get more views. It was supposed to inspire change, not violence. However, because people lost their lives in these real-life copycat crimes, the film developed a dark reputation. Eventually, because of the film's violent content and negative message, it was banned in Ireland and the Philippines. And maybe banning it was for the best. This next movie doesn't have any violence or disgusting scenes, but it was still banned in multiple countries. The question is, why? The Gods Must Be Crazy. The Gods Must Be Crazy was supposed to be a comedy, but instead of making people laugh, it made them mad. But unlike other banned films, it wasn't the visuals that shocked people, it was the story itself. The Gods Must Be Crazy is a South African film from 1980. The story begins when a pilot flying over the Kalahari Desert throws a Coke bottle out of his plane. The bottle falls through the sky and lands in the desert perfectly intact. An African tribe called the San people finds the bottle, and since they've never seen a bottle before, they think it's a magical object.
When something falls from the sky, it can only have come from the gods.
The tribe puts the bottle to use in all kinds of ways. They use it as a musical instrument, a fire starter, and even a cooking utensil. But what starts as a blessing quickly turns into a curse. Since there's only one bottle to share, it leads to fights and jealousy among the tribe members. He, one of the tribesmen, decides the bottle is causing too much trouble. He takes it and sets off on a journey to return it to the gods.
The unusual story of Key, the bushman, as he travels to the edge of the earth to return the god's mistake.
Along the way, Key meets new people, gets into strange situations, and has many adventures. The film ran for 109 minutes and cost $5 million to produce. When it was released in September 1980, it didn't disappoint. The Gods Must Be Crazy slowly became a worldwide hit. It was the most financially successful South African film ever produced at the time. It earned about $200 million worldwide and was translated into multiple languages.
The Gods Must Be Crazy. An epic comedy of absurd proportions.
But not everyone found it entertaining. While it was being praised in some places, it was being condemned in others. People were angry about how the movie portrayed the African tribe that found the bottle. Critics said it made Black Africans look like primitive simpletons or incompetent buffoons. People living in African and Afro-Caribbean countries were the most upset. They felt the movie was making fun of them. Others tried to calm the situation, saying people were reading too much into a comedy meant to entertain. But that didn't reduce the backlash. The movie was banned in several African and Afro-Caribbean countries. To this day, people continue to debate whether The Gods Must Be Crazy is a harmless comedy or an offensive movie. When you think of witchcraft, Harry Potter probably comes to mind. But there's another witchcraft movie so creepy, many people couldn't sit through it. Hexen, Witchcraft Through the Ages. When Hexen was made in 1922, it was the most expensive film ever produced in Scandinavia. It also took 3 whole years to film, but after all that effort, it was banned for being too disturbing. And that's because this film was about a topic that many people were scared of. Hexen is a horror film that explores the history of witchcraft. The film is split into several parts, each dividing into a different aspect of the subject. It was directed by Benjamin Christensen. To prepare for the film, Christensen read an ancient book about how to identify, hunt, and capture witches. During filming, he went to extreme lengths to make everything feel real.
To evoke the right mood, Christensen shot most of the film at night, also highly unusual for 1922.
The director even acted in the film himself, playing the role of the devil taunting priests and nuns. But the most disturbing part of the movie comes in part 3, where it shows how witches were persecuted in the Middle Ages. It begins when a man named Jesper passes away lying in bed. His death seems natural, but Jesper's family believes he was murdered. The family accuses a poor old woman named Maria of taking Jesper's life. But Maria never even touched Jesper, so how could she have possibly harmed him? The family had an answer. Maria was a witch. Maria is old, wrinkled, and homeless. She looked exactly like what people thought a witch should look like, and that's all it took for them to accuse her. Back then, they believed witches could harm others using spells and curses. Jesper's family is so sure Maria is responsible that they report her to the judges. Maria is arrested and interrogated. At first, Maria insists she's innocent. She says, "How do you expect me to confess that which is not true?" But the judges pressure Maria until she finally cracks. Maria gives a false confession, saying she's done horrible things. She said she gave birth to the devil's children, attended demonic feasts, and used magical ointments. But then Maria gets a bit carried away with her confession. She begins to accuse other women in the village of being witches too. The judges take notes as Maria names other supposed witches. Soon they have a long list. The women Maria accused are arrested and pressured to confess. Once they confess, they too are forced to name other witches in the village. It became a vicious cycle where, as the story says, every witch gives 10 other witches away. By the end, multiple women are found guilty and sentenced to be burned at the stake. The punishment is brutal and hard to watch. When Hexen was released in September 1922, it was very different from the other movies of that era. It showed people without clothes, black magic rituals, and a realistic devil with horns. The list goes on. There were torture chambers, possessed nuns, and even sacrifices. Hexen wasn't just a movie, it was a nightmare on screen. Because of the disturbing visuals, the film got a lot of backlash. Remember, this was way back in 1922. One movie critic said Hexen was absolutely unfit for public exhibition. In the United States, it was banned outright. Even in Sweden, where it was made, theaters were scared to play it. The filmmakers had to cut out some of the scariest parts just to get it shown. But even after the cuts, people still thought the film was too much to handle. Over time though, Hexen became a classic. The makeup sets, costumes, and special effects were ahead of their time. Today, Hexen is even listed as one of the 1001 movies you must see before you die. And if you're not too scared, you should check it out. This next movie involves cruelty, gore, and death traps. Pretty gruesome. Saw 6. The Saw franchise became famous for its gruesome, violent horror. The fans loved it and they kept coming back for more. The first 5 Saw movies made over $400 million at the box office, turning a massive profit. So when it was time to make Saw 6, the producers decided to take things to the next level. But some people think they went a little too far.
Saw 6.
To really understand Saw 6, you need to know what the series is about. The Saw franchise centers around a vigilante known as Jigsaw. Jigsaw has a twisted concept of justice. He believes that bad people need to be punished, but not necessarily by going to jail. They need to face life or death situations designed to teach them moral lessons. In Jigsaw's mind, if they survive these challenges, they'll become better people. So Jigsaw kidnaps these so-called bad people and forces them to play horrifying games where survival is not guaranteed. Saw 6 begins with 2 loan sharks who've been captured by Jigsaw. He throws them into a deadly game with one rule. Only one of them can leave alive. What follows is a brutal contest for survival. In the end, only one makes it out. That set the tone for the rest of the movie. Jigsaw's next target is a health insurance executive named William. The reason why William is there is because he denies insurance coverage to people who desperately need medical care. This didn't age well.
But my requests for coverage have all been turned down. Yeah. So I was hoping that if I came and explained it to you that you might be able to get that overturned for me.
Jigsaw captures William and takes him to an abandoned zoo. A videotape informs William that he must complete a series of tests to survive. The challenges in this movie aren't random. Every one of them is designed to punish William for his decisions and force him to confront the lives he's ruined. As the movie goes on, the tests become more brutal and the stakes get higher. The producers poured $11 million into making the movie as scary as possible. In October 2009, Saw 6 was finally released. That's when the trouble began. Saw 6 was so graphic and intense that many countries had an issue with it. Even in America, where horror films often push boundaries, the Motion Picture Association demanded that the gruesome opening scene should be toned down before the movie could be approved for release. In Spain, things were even more problematic. Spanish film authorities gave the film an X rating for extreme violence. This meant the film could not be shown in any theater in Spain. The producers were forced to cut some of the most graphic scenes. Only then did Spain lower the rating to an 18. This meant it could be shown in theaters, but only for adult audiences. However, other countries weren't willing to compromise. In Thailand and Malaysia, Saw 6 was flat out banned. Trinidad and Tobago also banned the film. Despite all the controversy, Saw 6 still managed to earn $69.8 million worldwide. Although that sounds impressive, it was the lowest grossing film in the Saw franchise at the time. Many people think the movie was just so unwatchable that it hurt its box office performance. As one review said, Saw 6 is the 6th Saw I've seen and maybe the sickest. This next film is so twisted that watching it feels like a punishment. The Human Centipede 2 full sequence. Before any movie can be released in the UK, it has to be approved by the National Film Board. It's a standard process, but when the Human Centipede full sequence was submitted for approval, the authorities didn't just reject it. They said it was just too horrible to show. Usually, a rejected movie can cut out the bad scenes and reapply for approval, but not this time. The board said that no amount of cuts would allow them to give this film a certificate. So what was in this movie that caused such an extreme reaction? The Human Centipede full sequence is about a man named Martin Lomax. Martin is a security guard who works in an underground parking garage. But Martin has a secret obsession. He wants to create something called a human centipede. It's a twisted concept where multiple people are stitched together to form one long, crawling creature like a centipede. He got the idea from a movie he watched. Martin is so fixated on this idea that he even tells his mom about it. Obviously, she thinks he's out of his mind.
He keeps on talking about a centipede with 12 people.
But Martin doesn't care what anyone thinks. Even though he has no medical training, he starts gathering tools like duct tape and a staple gun to bring his twisted vision to life. He also finds an abandoned warehouse, which is the perfect spot for his plan. Then Martin begins kidnapping people one by one and taking them to the warehouse. Once he has 12 people, Martin begins his experiment. He uses a staple gun and duct tape to attach them together, and I'll let you fill in the rest. And yes, the movie shows every moment of this process. Once his creation is complete, Martin forces the centipede to crawl, deriving pleasure from his twisted work. But his experiment doesn't go as planned. The centipede begins to fall apart because people can't be attached that way. Disappointed by his failure, Martin snaps. He starts to get physical with his captives, but during the scuffle, Martin gets hurt. At that moment, the scene suddenly changes. Martin is back in the underground garage where he works, sitting at his desk like nothing happened. It seems everything the audience just saw was a dream. After filming Wrapped, the editors spent months piecing everything together. The final product was 91 minutes of pure horror. The film didn't have a lot of dialogue, mostly screams and whimpers. Then they submitted it to the British Board of Film Classification for approval. But instead of getting approval, they got condemned. The UK Film Board flat out refused to give the film a certificate. They claimed the movie posed a real risk to cinema goers.
The look and atmosphere of this movie are disgusting. It being black and white and often dimly lit just makes this world look depressing and gives me this uncomfortable feeling.
Not getting approved meant the film couldn't be legally supplied anywhere in the UK, even on DVD or download. It was essentially banned across the country. As expected, the director was not happy with the board's decision. He issued a public statement criticizing their stance. He said, "Thank you for banning my film in this exceptional way. Apparently, I made a horrific horror film, but shouldn't a good horror film be horrific? Give people their own choice to watch it or not. If people can't handle or like my movies, they just don't watch them. If people like my movies, they have to be able to see it anytime, anywhere, also in the UK." For most films, a ban like this would have been the end of the story, but the Human Centipede was different. Instead of avoiding the controversy, the producers leaned into it, using the ban as a key part of their marketing strategy. In the trailer, they said Human Centipede banned in the UK poses a real risk that harm is likely to be caused to potential viewers. All the controversy made people in the UK more curious about the movie. They wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Even though the film couldn't be legally sold or shown in the UK, the internet was impossible to control. Thousands of Brits found ways to watch it, either by ordering import DVDs or streaming it online. Meanwhile, The Human Centipede premiered in other countries where it was not banned. As moviegoers entered theaters, they were given barf bags just in case the film made them throw up. Some theaters even parked ambulances outside in case viewers fainted in shock. During one premiere, the movie affected a woman so much that paramedics had to assist her. One movie critic who saw the film summarized it in this way: "It's not really a film one can or should enjoy. Sometimes just hearing a movie title is enough to tell you it's going to be disturbing." This next banned film is a perfect example of that. Faces of Death. Faces of Death is a film most people cannot handle, and in 1985, a teacher learned that lesson the hard way. In June of that year, a math teacher in California decided to show this film to a bunch of high school students. But two of the students who watched the movie were so affected by it that they developed an unnatural fear of dying and suffered emotional distress. Their families were so mad they sued the school district. In the end, the district had to pay a $100,000 settlement to the two families. That's how serious this apparently was. But what was in this film that made it so unbearable to watch? Faces of Death is a 1978 film that explores the topic of death, but it doesn't just talk about it, it shows it.
Now, a motion picture dares to take you beyond the threshold of the living, where you may discover your own face of death.
Almost every scene shows someone meeting their end in different ways: accidents, natural disasters, and more. But it's a movie, so those scenes must be fake, right? Well, approximately 60% of the film shows actual deaths caught on camera. The producers brought this footage from news stations, medical researchers, and even morgues. But the fake scenes weren't any easier to watch. They were so realistic that viewers couldn't tell the difference from the real footage. To achieve this, the producers studied crime crime scene photos to make sure their special effects looked exactly like the real thing. Faces of Death is split into different sections. One segment features an interview with a hitman where he speaks about taking lives like it's nothing. Another scene shows a gunfight between a SWAT team and an armed criminal. There's even a segment about animals. The film runs for 105 minutes, dragging viewers through one disturbing scene after another. However, the movie tries to end on a positive note. The final scene shows a mother holding her newborn baby, almost as if the filmmakers were trying to calm the audience after all the unsettling content they just watched. The film was released in November 1978, and the public reaction was explosive. Given that most of the scenes were real, viewers felt the movie crossed every possible line. One reviewer described the film as crude, tasteless exploitation footage. He ended by saying people should be ashamed to watch this garbage. As the complaints piled up, the movie was banned in about 46 countries. In the UK, Faces of Death was placed on the video nasty list. This meant it was illegal to sell or rent the film there. Australia and New Zealand followed suit, banning the film in the 1980s. Over time, some countries lifted the bans, but even in places where it's allowed, the film has a dark reputation. And honestly, most people wouldn't dare watch it even if they were given the chance. Movies influence us more than we realize. Watching too much graphic content can actually desensitize us to it, which is sometimes a scary thing. My friends, choose very wisely what you watch because it matters way more than you think. Visualventure. If you guys like this video, click here to watch my video on documentaries banned for being too disturbing, which is pretty much like this one. You guys are the best. Here's to a wonderful 2025. Peace.